Good evening and welcome to Face to Face. For the Newsfirst team, I'm Niresh Eliyatambi. Well, when you look at social media these days, you see a lot of people who seem to expect the new government under President AKD to wave a magic wand and sort out a whole lot of problems. But it's not so easy. Whatever may have been said at the election rallies before the elections and in manifestos and so on, when it comes down to actually implementing policies, especially economic ones, there's a lot more to it, as we all know. Now, to discuss what's going on with our economy, we have with us this evening Mr. Dhanusha Gihan Pathirana, a well-known economist. Good evening, Gihan, and you braved the bad weather and got here. Thank you very much for doing that.
Thank you for having me.
Right. Now, Gihan, let's get down to the IMF. We had good news over the weekend, or so we thought. But that's the news that we get for mass consumption. What's in the fine print? Anything changed? Are we just going as it was under President Ranil Wickremesinghe's time, or do we have any significant changes?
First of all, thanks a lot, Niresh, for having me. And well, it's to say about the IMF program and what the current NPP regime is now actually following, there is absolutely no difference between what the previous Ranil Wickremesinghe administration has in fact signed on to, and for instance, the ISB agreements was revealed
International Sovereign Bonds.
International Sovereign Bonds restructuring agreement that was again discussed back in September and was revealed 2 days before the elections. In fact, it was a violation of election laws also to go ahead and come up with a broad statement like that. And the current, unfortunately, the current NPP regime have also taken the same path forward.
But did they have a choice? I mean, as you said, this was done 2 days before the election, which is absolutely ridiculous. I mean, it should have been hands off by the former president, for at least, I don't know, a month or so before the election, because has he sort of put the NPP government in a corner? Did they have a choice?
I think the NPP government definitely or certainly did have two choices in the sense to come up with their own assessment of the debt situation and basically get a much more broader consensus among the creditors that would benefit, in the long term, the external position of the economy. Why I am saying this is because that was only an agreement in principle. So that is to say, although there is some consensus regarding certain fundamental clauses, there is so much of scope to be renegotiated, even in that instant also. And also given the fact that NPP, the government itself, got the mandate of the public, and now it has 2/3 mandate. Whereas the previous administration came to power through a constitutional loophole rather than through an election process. So therefore there was the complete capability with regard to the NPP government to argue on those two lines where they have a different mandate now, especially provided by the public, where they were promising alternative DSA and so on, and based on that they should be able to secure a greater haircut, and therefore to get our debt position in actually sustainable status. Whereas right now things are, even according to the IMF, we are still on a knife edge. position according to their latest report and the review, mind you. And just to give you few brief numbers about this, now since this particular agreement is backdated onto 2024, now that they have already issued the new bonds and given a deadline of December 12th as the December 12th, the final date for the bondholders to exchange their previous bonds to these restructured bonds, so that it's already been done now. Now the thing is, the agreement holds that the payments should start from 2024, but given that we are issuing the bonds now in mid-December, our payments will obviously start from early next year. So that means we have to account for the repayments due in 2024 and 2025 both together.
That puts a bit of pressure, doesn't it?
Bit of pressure, because it will amount to something like 1.85 billion in repayments, both on the ISBs and also on the bilaterals. Now I got the confirmation from the central bank that we have to pay interest on the bilaterals also. So obviously otherwise that will be a violation of the comparability of treatment, a general consensus that is there when it comes to debt restructuring, that you have to treat all parties equally. So since we are paying interest on the ISBs, we'll also have to pay interest on the bilateral debt also.
That's with the foreign governments that we have taken loans.
That comes to, the total capital comes to around 10.5 billion. So we have a 2% interest on that. So 2 years interest would be something like 420 million there. And then on top of that we have...
And you're talking US dollars here.
US dollars, absolutely. And then you have 1.4 billion worth of interest, plus what we just discussed before. There's a plain vanilla bond on the past due interest, which means that it is not linked to anything, the macroeconomy or anything. It's just a regular bond without any clauses where the terms of the bond will change over time. It does not change. So we have a 4% interest on past due interest also. So interest on top of interest. So this is what we have signed on to. That's why we are saying this is a disastrous deal actually, to begin with, compared to what countries like Ghana and so on have secured through a negotiation of the government. Why we are saying that is because for instance in Ghana, the negotiation process was also done by Lazard, likewise in Sri Lanka, whereas Ghana government was capable and instrumental in securing a greater haircut of in nominal terms they got 4.4 billion for their 13 billion debt. So we have a similar amount of debt. We have 14.55 on top of what we haven't paid, capital and interest. And now today Bloomberg have also said Sri Lanka will get a haircut of 12 to 16 cents. This means 12 to 16%, right? Whereas Ghana got 37%, and they have capped their interest rates at 6%. Mostly it's 5%.
So you seem a little disappointed in the performance of Lazard, and those were the two companies, Lazard and Clifford Chance, which were employed by the government of Sri Lanka to do these negotiations with the various debt holders.
In fact, Niresh, I am disappointed with our central bank and the government. The point I tried to explain there was, look, the two processors was negotiated by Lazard, but two different outcomes came out. That is because because Lazard is a company who would cater to their clients. What the client would demand, that would be their mandate.
So you're saying we, the central bank and the government, doesn't seem to have pushed very hard.
Definitely, because there is, as far as I see, there is a significant amount of vested interest behind these agreements, especially considering the fact that Sri Lanka's own, the corporates own 1.8 billion worth of these bonds. So if you slash a significant portion of these bonds, that would mean our corporates will have to take a hit, right? So there is significant vested interest in getting a deal that is more beneficial for the creditors. In this case, it's very clear, because now if you take our let's go into that for a bit. Now, the local bondholders of ISBs bought it during the COVID period.
That's right.
Right, when the prices of these bonds collapsed. There was a week where the prices collapsed by 93%. That means when our face value, let's say 100 cents, you could have bought it at 7 cents. But our corporates did not get that chance. At that point, the locals were not allowed to buy the ISBs. On June or July 30th of 2020, under the central bank, former Governor W.D. Lakshman allowed the locals to go and purchase. So then they just started, collecting these in billions. And this went up to 1.8 billion in the face value of it. But the amount of dollars they spent on it is significantly less, far less. At that time, the prices were something like 50 to 55 cents. So that means you are having a discount of almost half, 50%. Whereas in this particular deal, the locals get only 10% haircut. The interest rates go down to something like 1 to 2%. But they are making a huge, tremendous profits out of it. Let's say, so you spend 50 rupees, you get, instead of 100, you will get 90. So that means you are making 80% in profits. So whereas now, if you go and buy the bonds from the secondary market, you get a 55% discount. The fact that this is extremely beneficial for the creditors is again reflected through the markets, because now yesterday the price of our bonds have shot up to something like 68 cents, which was trading at around 55 cents. Still it's low, but that means it's giving benefits compared to the previous situation. It is more beneficial for the creditors. You would see, I mean, if there is a significant haircut that is benefiting the domestic or the general public of Sri Lanka, the bond values would rather move down a little bit more. So
now, governments and central banks are supposed to work for the people.
Absolutely.
And you're making the allegation that this was not so, that there were vested interests,
yes,
which worked against the interests of the people.
Yeah.
So isn't this corruption?
Absolutely. I'll tell you another example. Now, for instance, in the case of Ecuador, back in 2009, the similar situation happened where in the secondary markets, their bond values collapsed. Now, what did our government do and the central bank? They allowed our private corporates to go and buy and profit out of it. Now they will be eventually making profits because now the deal is done. What did the Ecuador government do in 2009? They slowly, undercover went into the secondary markets. The government started purchasing, right? So they got a 90% haircut on whatever they managed to purchase. And they just cancelled whatever, once the papers are back with them, the bank could cancel the bonds. So, in two contrasting cases where governments were actually representing their own public, the case of Ghana, in the case of Ecuador, I can name other examples also, where in the case of Sri Lanka, we see a extraordinary level of collusion with
but is it collusion or is it a lack of knowledge?
No, I think completely with the knowledge of these people, they are doing this. They are extremely knowledgeable. You speak to these guys, they are well educated. They have their CFA, CMAs and all done. They are well educated, they know what's going on. So they are capable of engineering all these stuff where, general public are kept in the dark. They are, of course, they don't know what's going on behind the doors. So I think it is the responsibility of the media to keep the public aware of what is going on, because end of the day, it's the public who will have to pay for this, because now, for instance, now from next year, the IMF wants us to increase our tax revenue to 15% of the GDP. Right now, it's 13%. Now, on top of this, now we have a disastrous debt deal also. Yes.
However it is done, to increase from 13% to 15% means that we will all be paying more taxes.
Absolutely.
They might say reduce pay tax and income tax, but they would have to implement some other tax directly or indirectly in order to bring this up to 15%, and that's quite significant.
It's significant because now if you take, although we see it as just a 2 percentage point increase, this is huge. Now this year's GDP will be roughly 31 trillion in rupees. Next year something like expected to be 34 to 35 trillion. Take 2% of that, that's huge, right? What is that? Something like 600 billion? So, and on top of that, we have to finance 1.85 billion worth of additional interest and debt repayments next year. So that will again come to another 600 billion.
Now, I think the last time you and I spoke, we came to the conclusion that the Wickremesinghe regime had simply kicked the ball down the road.
Exactly.
But we thought that the ball had actually been kicked a fair distance down the road, but now it's going to happen early next year.
Early next year, absolutely. That's the scary part of this, because currently our foreign reserves, the usable foreign reserves, excluding the 1.5 billion soft facility with the Chinese People Bank, that because it's in yuan and they have certain conditionalities on its usability. So even the IMF does not consider that as a part of the usable reserves. So we have roughly 5 billion in usable reserves, and
which is very small.
Which is very small because
$5 billion.
Exactly, because our imports are rising. Now, for the past 2.5 years up to June, our imports are something like roughly 1.4 billion a month. Now it has shot up to 1.7 billion, 25 to 20% increase, significant increase, even without relaxing the vehicle imports. Now, the other thing you have to see is that in 2018, when there was no pent-up demand for vehicles, that was the highest, that was the year where we imported most personal vehicles. We imported 1.6 billion worth of vehicles. Now, imagine now, after 7 years, we are the people are now dying to get into their new vehicles and drive around the country. I would say at least they will import vehicles worth of 1.5 billion. Looking at the past numbers, I mean, if you exclude 2018, it has been something like 1 billion roughly. But we can't, I don't think it will settle at 1 billion despite high taxes and so on. The profits have gone up, especially in the corporate sector, and even to compensate the professionals from these tax increases, I think their salaries have also increased to a certain extent. So because I was in a discussion with Dr. Kumaraswamy earlier, so he was trying to make the argument that we might not see 1.5 billion worth of imports in personal vehicles, but then personally came and told me, look, if it shoots out, then we have to completely stop that. But the thing is, so that means we are looking at roughly 3.5 billion in additional expenditure next year in terms of what debt repayments.
So this is a very tricky situation.
Yes.
And we need to take a short commercial break here, Gihan. But we will come back to this vehicle imports especially. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
A trusted place for your fixed deposit. Valuable FD, a symbol of stability.
ජාතික මෙහෙවරින් අපි කතා බහ කරන්නේ පුරුෂ පාර්ශවයට කාන්තා පාර්ශවයට වෙනසක් නැතුව ආයුර්වේදයට අනුව ලස්සන වෙන්නේ කොහොමද කියලා.
හොඳම මොයිස්චරයිස් එක තමයි කොමඩු.
යම්කිසි වයස් මට්ටම් වලට පැමිණෙනකොට ඇතිවෙන බෝන් නොවන රෝග තත්ත්වයන් තුලදී කොයි ආකාරයෙන්ද ඇස ආරක්ෂා කරගන්නේ?
බහුලවම අන්ධභාවයට පත්වන රෝගී තත්ත්ව ගත්තොත් ඇත්තටම ලෝකේ ලංකාවේ දෙකෙම නම්බර් 1 ඇත්තටම තියෙන සුද ඇහි සුද.
නිරාමිෂ සිතුවිලි වලින් තමයි පිබිදෙන්නේ. ඒනට ප්‍රශ්නේ ටික වෙලාවක් යනකොට වෙනස් පැත්තකට යන්න පුළුවන්.
මූලික අරමුණ සියදිවි හානි වැළැක්වීම වුණාට ඕනම කෙනෙකුට ඕනම ප්‍රශ්නයක් ඕනම ගැටලුවක් ගැන කතා කරන්න අපිත් එක්ක යොමු වෙන්න පුළුවන්.
ජාතික මෙහෙවර සතියේ දිනවල උදෑසන 11ට.
වාසුලා මෙතන ඉඳිලා නෑ බල බල හැමදෙම
ආලවන්ති tomorrow at 9 p.m.
Welcome back to Face to Face. We are with economist Dhanusha Gihan Pathirana. Gihan, now we were speaking about vehicle imports. We've gone for years without vehicle imports because we didn't have the money.
Yes.
Because you've got to pay for those vehicles in dollars. You can't pay in rupees. You and I might try to buy a vehicle in rupees, but in the end, if you're importing it, you've got to pay in dollars. And the country accepted this. No one said don't do it. And the country put up with it.
Yes.
So those who have vehicles are driving around in somewhat older vehicles now. But all of a sudden we hear this sort of stringent cry for vehicle imports to be allowed again.
Exactly.
So why is that? Is there a real need, number one? Because we are a country which we've got a lot of vehicles. And at the same time, can we actually afford this?
Niresh, now first thing, what would happen with this complete relaxation of lifting of restriction on import vehicles or vehicle imports is that our savings ratio will go down significantly. It will collapse, because in any school of thought in economics, if you want to transform or produce more, let's say, just to keep things simple, you need first of all to boost your savings. Your savings only transforms into capital. Now what would this particular measure do to our savings? It will shift our already whatever the savings we have into consumption, and that would mean our future capacity to produce will go down with this. Not only it will go down, it will create certain havoc or issues in the external sector itself. One thing is that it will eat into our reserves, and the other thing that it will also increase our oil bill in the future, because some of these vehicles will be super luxury vehicles. It will just guzzling fuel. So even now 1/4 our imports bill goes to fuel imports. So now imagine a situation where now we are in a very volatile global situation, where at any moment we might see violence erupting in the Middle East, maybe in the Ukraine or wherever in the world. This can have a significant impact on the price of oil and also the so-called inflow of tourism. So when we are relaxing or allowing foreign exchange into completely unnecessary amount of spending and shifting our savings into consumption, endangering the external stability, our reserves will have a major hit. And we might even go back to 2022 if let's say the oil prices hit something like $85 to $90 per barrel. Right now it's
Gihan, Sri Lanka is extraordinarily susceptible to these external shocks.
Absolutely.
When COVID hit, it just destroyed the economy. Whatever was left of the economy after the Gotabaya regime got through with it, COVID was a massive hit, and we simply can't afford that, can we? We need our tourists to come here. We need people to buy our tea and so on. We can't have even one sector collapsing. I mean, with COVID, we had our Middle East labor was sent back home. So we had multiple issues. And you're talking about oil prices, which are very finicky. And right now, the situation in the Middle East is extraordinarily bad. The war has actually spread to so many countries. Although there's fortunately a ceasefire started today in Lebanon. But when you look at the number of countries in the Middle East which are involved, and even outside the Middle East, you're talking not just Israel and Lebanon, but Iran, and then the US, the Soviets, the so-called Western allies in Europe, India, everybody is involved. So and very few regimes seem to be behaving in a rational manner. So it's at a time like this that a country like Sri Lanka is extraordinarily vulnerable.
Yes, and they are completely being very relaxed about this situation. It's quite
but we have a habit of doing this.
And
we have this island mentality that it'll work out.
True, but then again, Niresh, the current NPP regime, during their campaign, political campaigns, they were saying, for instance, they were even ready to re-export the state, the luxury of these motorcades and so on, which I know that they're not using. That's a good thing. But then what have they done with the vehicles? Then after coming to power, they said they're going to redistribute, but it's not going to serve any purpose. You're sending a luxury vehicle into some remote corner wouldn't serve much purpose compared to what they were actually telling the public. They're saying, especially now the President Annakumara, in his campaign speeches clearly said, even I have these videos of him saying that we will send these vehicles off out of the country and we'll get the foreign exchange, and then that foreign exchange you can use that to to invest in whatever development projects they wish to go into. So but right now, instead of re-exporting, they are re-importing. So going the complete the opposite direction which Ranil Wickremesinghe was actually proposing. Now he was also proposing during his tenure that he's going to relax sooner or later all these import restrictions on vehicles. So
but let me break in here and ask you, do we need so many new vehicles? I mean, I can understand things like office vans, buses, school buses.
Those are allowed.
All that. That's fine. Tourist coaches and so on. But do we need private vehicles? Is there such a dire need right now? I'm not saying don't import them forever. I'm just saying right now, in 2 or 3 months, do we need to do it, or should we perhaps wait a bit longer?
Exactly, because right now in October, the World Bank came out with their poverty, regular assessment on the level of poverty in Sri Lanka, and not just on Sri Lanka, they do for all other countries also. So they show roughly 24% of the population living under poverty.
And poverty is defined by the World Bank as $3
$3 a day. So
and you can't live on $3 a day.
Exactly. And
that's impossible.
It's impossible. So I mean that means a significantly larger population is in extreme economic distress right now. So while those problems are just remaining or just staring at your face, the government goes and allows all this. So this is the capital.
But they haven't yet.
Haven't yet, but they have already announced that they are going to do this. So I mean they can also anytime reverse it, but as far as we see it, that's what they're going to do. So this is the savings of the country they can use to expand the productive base, and then which would have an impact on the wage rates, and employment would increase. That therefore these poverty rates can be brought down in a sustainable way, not just just handouts, so that in the long run we are on a safer path. But right now we are going exactly the way what the Ranil Wickremesinghe had proposed, which the people of this country rejected. Not saying people were so focused on these type of specific issues, but they were mostly wanting to chase the old guard off and the former political elite, which they have done. But then we have to see.
You're saying the system change hasn't happened yet.
Yes.
The signs are not exactly promising.
Not promising because there are so many levels of this, at least mainly 2-3 levels of this. One is of course this corrupted political elite, which we have been sort of financing right throughout since independence, but now they have got rid of them. But then again there are other pressing issues as well. What is the nature of our business elite? Where are they putting their money, or how are they investing? What is the repercussions of that particular pattern of investments? Do we need to move out of that, and how are we going to do that? What is the role of the government, right? So these things have to be assessed. And what is the situation of our foreign debt and the debt negotiation? How are we going to get a more favorable terms? What are the arguments we should be using? So these type of things, and especially to see whether the interest of the current the nature of investments capable of bringing those 1/4 of people who are living under poverty, is it capable of taking them out of poverty? In fact, the current pattern of investment have actually thrown them into this particular predicament. So it is the state responsibility to take a much more deeper look at what's going on and to come up with solutions, say looking at.
But is it so complicated? Now it almost sounds very complicated, but to me, if the country has only so many $1 billion, why are we going to spend much of that on private vehicles when the government could use some of that to put more trains on the tracks?
Absolutely.
And our public transport services is abysmal. I mean, every day we get the news alerts saying this train has derailed, that train has derailed, and as a result, tens of thousands of commuters are delayed in getting to work. Or getting to school. So, I mean, just one derailment can stop, 10 trains from coming. So, or at least delay them. So that is a huge cost to the economy. If you suddenly don't have 20,000 people coming into Colombo because the train has derailed, that's a huge cost in productivity, isn't it? So doesn't it make more sense to focus on these areas which really matter?
Exactly.
Common sense.
Exactly.
I mean, you're the economist, not me, but it just seems common sense.
I think you have more economic sense than most of our economists, because mostly the policy decisions are made through the advisor, these ideas given out by our mainstream economists, which are, they want to let the market do the job. Now my point is, market have not just not done the job, have also been part of this collapse. So first we have to sort that out, clear that out. Then only we can move into ideas like yours. Look here, now we can think rationally. Initially we were clouded by all these neoclassical, neoliberal economic mantra that just assures you that market will like magically do everything, make everything, all issues sorted. But the problem is, in countries like ours, market itself is a failure when it comes to sorting all these broader socio-economic issues that might have worked for 15 to 20% of the population, where now they are doing brilliantly, but not to the constituency as a whole. So the government needs to understand this. Now I think the way I see it is, right now even this NPP government is also following the market mantra of the former Ranil Wickremesinghe regime. In a way, people sort of not entirely knowingly completely rejected that. Look, we are suffering under this. So it is up to you to come up with a mechanism. We don't know what exactly that is, but they have clearly given the mandate to choose your own path in where the country and the economy and where the state should put their money in, and how they should use the savings already available. Right now they are going the exact opposite direction. Like you said, why do we need to waste our precious foreign exchange savings in wasting it into just individual certain elites, or maybe like well-off segment of our population, just to entertain their
don't get me wrong, everyone likes to have a new car, whether it's a BMW or just a Tata, right? It doesn't matter. You do like to have something new, but then there's a time and a place for everything.
Yes, possibly, but then again, I would also, there are other, ways of looking at the world when it comes to, criticizing consumerism, whether, everybody needs, if we have significantly, usable public transport, do we actually have to resort to this type of wasteful consumption? Because we have also have to keep in mind, it's not just our consumer needs, it also affects the broader society and also the ecology of it. Right now we are
it comes right back to bite us,
yes.
To bite those in the middle class.
Yes.
Because if you are going to waste the country's resources, or misplace them, in your priorities, then it's our economy is far too fragile for this.
Far too fragile, and also we see now those who have actually embarked on this consumerist journey are now facing the repercussions of, let's say, ecological change and so on. But there is so what I am personally proposing is not some consumerist future, but there is the basic needs, and the quality of life expands in a way that public social relations are more strengthened rather than individual consumerist values. Where I agree with you, Niresh, is that right now it is even more detrimental of going down that path. We don't have the necessary savings, we don't have the necessary production structure to cater to that type of consumerism, and I don't see any political party going head on against these policies. Is there any political party in this country protesting allowing personal vehicle imports? Nobody is protesting that. Even the left is not protesting that. So they are also part of this whole consumerist scheme type of they want to entertain those values.
Now, it seems rather strange, some of these decisions, or perhaps it's just strange to us, and there may be some deeper rationale behind it. But of course, when you look at the NPP, their representatives in Parliament, and of course the ministers and deputy ministers, they have set a very fine example. They're not splurging, no tamashas, no luxury vehicles. So it's rather puzzling that on the one hand they're being very frugal, which everyone appreciates.
Which we should appreciate.
And it's actually, it goes beyond just them being frugal. It is an example to the rest of the country. But on the other hand, we may be allowing spending on a scale which we can't finance.
Because now in 2022, it was the IMF who said, look here, you are in a deep mess. Obviously, you know that you are facing it right now. One of the causes is this extra large vehicle fleet, which the size of your economy is not capable of handling this much of vehicles. They clearly said that in the 2022 Article 4 assessment of the country, and they wanted the government to come up with some sort of a framework to get rid of some of these vehicles. And right now they're saying you have to come and liberalize. So when things look like they are at least some sort of in a stable situation, mainly because I would say because our price of oil and so on have settled down at a low level compared to 2022, and we have jacked up the prices and interest rates, so nobody could go and buy. So both these areas combined, now we are in a stable situation, whereas quarter to one third are living in poverty.
But on a knife's edge,
exactly,
to
on
use
a knife.
the terminology of the IMF itself.
And while they're saying we are on a knife's edge, they are actually promoting this move. They're saying, look, you will get some tax revenue out of it. Look, tax revenue is in rupees, but we'll be in a deeper trouble in terms of dollars.
No, we never had a huge problem with rupees. Our petrol sheds did not run dry because of a rupee crisis.
Exactly.
It was a foreign exchange crisis. Our banking system simply didn't have
enough dollars,
euros, and all those foreign currencies. That's what it was. An importer couldn't open an LC because the bank would say, we don't have the dollars.
Absolutely.
So this seems rather ridiculous.
So this is where we have to actually, I think, have a very critical analysis of what the IMF itself is doing. Now they have gained to a certain extent they have, I think, gained the trust of the Sri Lankan public, because I think to a certain extent they believe, despite all the hardships they right now face, IMF was responsible in bringing some sort of stability that we are in right now.
They certainly did.
We
would not have come out of this hole even up to this point without the IMF.
I would like to disagree there with you, Niresh. There were other avenues which were available to us.
Well, my point is, we had dug ourselves into such a hole that we simply didn't have a lot of choices.
There were choices that even back then in 2022 we were proposing. Now it's not just we are just showing like a pie in the sky, that this has been done before, like countries like, for instance, like Argentina. Now people would tell you that, look, those guys have been defaulting ever since. But that is not the path that we are proposing. This is a certain particular phase of history where they managed the crisis even without the IMF. Once they faced default, this was in 2001 to 2005.
But that was our problem. We simply didn't manage the crisis. The Gotabaya regime simply behaved as if there is no crisis.
The same thing happened in Argentina. A corrupted government, like the governments which was chased out by the public right now, Argentina had the same issue. Then sort of a center-left government came. Then they said, look, first thing they did was they declared their debt, most of it as odious. Because look, they said, look here, most of these borrowed funds were not used in the interest of the public. So you cannot hold public responsible for a debt that was borrowed who benefited somebody else. And with that argument, they showed, look, there is legal provisions for this in the US district law. So even if you go to courts, we are having the upper hand. So the creditors had to agree. Creditors agreed for a 70% haircut. That is how they did it. What have we done? We have gone and agreed to something like 12 to 16%. And with interest rates reaching almost 10%, Niresh. 9.75 by 2032. And after 28, we are paying 6.8% weighted average. So these are extremely high interest rates. Whereas even Ghana, without reaching such large haircuts, mostly the interest rates are somewhere in 5%, and for a brief period of time it will reach 6%. So they had alternative visions, thinking how to sort of face the international infrastructure when it comes to debt restructuring. Is this the only way forward? Okay, if you want even IMF involved, still we could have got a better deal out of it, even with the IMF or without the IMF. We are even very scared to think of a situation without the IMF. So we'll leave it out a little bit there. I just want to focus on the current situation, what's going on now. Now that they have sort of some sort of credibility, now they're pushing their more real agenda right now. They want you to
But that only works, Gihan, if we allow it.
They would allow it. That's what I mean. That seems to be what is happening right now. Because I think the NPP has been pressurized by all these embassies, and on one hand, and then on the other hand, the Western embassies.
Well, it's still early days.
Early days, but yes.
And of course, the NPP government has to find its feet a little bit.
They have to find it, but at the moment, it looks like they are relying on what the former administration have left in the office as a way forward. So which is going to be detrimental for their own survival. That is the issue here, because they will have to raise more taxes, especially for the debt repayments, and to reach these IMF targets. Because I'm saying this now, IMF is in the Article 4 report that came out recently, they're saying we have tax expenditure going up to 4.1% of the GDP back in 2022. That was more than half of the total tax revenue. Our tax revenue was something like 7.3. This is what IMF is saying. Our tax expenditure, that means the tax income that the government has sort of let go because of concessions. Now the NPP government is not talking about that. They have to do this. Otherwise they are going to be in a huge mess, because they will have to put all the pressure on the people in terms of finding the additional revenue.
Well, I certainly hope that doesn't happen, because the people really can't stomach much more than what they went through over the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
And I'm afraid, Gihan, that we are out of time. Time does fly when you delve into these subjects, and we will bring you back soon in the next few weeks, so we can take a closer look at some of these issues, especially things like odious debt.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for being with us,
Thanks
despite a semi-cyclone which is out there.
Yes.
And thank you. And thank you to you at home for watching. Don't go away, because the news is coming up next. Have a good evening.
A trusted place for your fixed deposit. Valuable FD, a symbol of stability.
No
ජනප්‍රිය ගායන ශිල්පී මදුෂාන් නානායක්කාරගේ නවතම ගීතය නොදැනීම Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube ඇතුළු ඔබගේ ප්‍රියතම සංගීත සේවාවන් හරහා රස විඳින්න.
Entertainments.
A trusted place for your fixed deposit. Valuable FD, a symbol of stability.